Hello, everybody. Good evening or good morning to those in the US. I'm Hannes Werten, and I welcome you to this lecture of today on this digital humanism lecture. And I think if I count correctly, it's already our 16th lecture or panel discussion within 1 year. So we are rather active. The topic of today is one of the major topics we have discussed up so far, or digital humanism is dealing with. It's on platform economy, and it's also pointing at the issue of the so-called tech giants. The lecture will be given by Cristiano Codagnoni. He's coming from the University of Milano, Università Statale, and I am happy to have him with us. Welcome, Cristiano. He will then be introduced by Paul Timmers, who will moderate the discussion afterwards. After the discussion, as always, please do not forget that we finish with a piece of music, an idea which were given by Helga, and I thank her for that because I think it's one of the fixed agenda items on our discussions. The music of today is selected by Stefanie Vogovic, and then it's introduced by Mete Sertkan. Our, let's say, normal guy to do this is Peter Knees, our music expert. He is not with us today and he's not available. So Mete will do this afterwards. Before handing over to Paul and introducing Paul, I also would remind you, for those who are maybe with us for the first time, to have a look at our website, the Digital Humanism website at the TU Wien, where you can find all the presentations up to now, all the talks, and you can also go to the YouTube channel where you have streamed all our discussions up to now. It's a pleasure to introduce Paul Timmers. We know each other since the year 2000, when he was still with the European Commission, where he was a director for digital society, trust and cybersecurity. So he was one of the guys responsible for developing or planning the development of the digital society within Europe. He is with Oxford University as a research associate, and he is also a adjunct professor at the University of Cyprus, the European University of Cyprus. Paul is very active in the field, what we are discussing. He is at the board of Digital Enlightenment Forum, which is a partner association of our activity, and he's also in the supervisory board of the e-governance academy of Estonia. And what I did not know, but I read it today, Paul, you have a doctorate in philosophy and physics. So you are, let's say, well trained to discuss digitalization and platform economy. Paul, thanks for being with us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Hannes. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm really honored, and happy to be in the digital humanism community and also coming from the digital enlightenment community. 16, isn't that 1111 in binary?
Yeah.
You know, very digital magic number in digital, I would say. But I'm especially pleased that we have Cristiano Codagnoni here today. Cristiano and I have been working together also for a long time, not as long as with Hannes, but a long time. And I have always enormously appreciated his insights and his analysis and his willingness to discuss with all of us about these very, very difficult issues that we are encountering in the digital society, where we go sometimes also through dark ages. And today we have a very important topic that Cristiano will bring to us. Cristiano, as Hannes said, is a professor at the Open University of Catalonia and also at the University of Milano in the Department of Social and Political Sciences. We met in the context of the European Commission, but he has also worked at the United Nations and as well as at the European Union as a civil servant. Applied research studies he did, impact evaluations that are so super important in developing policy in a proper way in the European context for sure, but worldwide, on a whole range of topics from digital to healthcare, industrial policy, research policy. Generally, in the field of digital transformation. And he has also published not too long ago a book about platform economics, reality and rhetoric in the sharing economy. And I can really recommend that. And I said, Cristiano is also a member of the advisory board of Digital Enlightenment Forum. Cristiano will use some slides, give a presentation, and then we will have the opportunities to interact, have questions, answers, and debate right after that. So Cristiano, with that, I hand the floor to yours, and I think you can share your screen for the slides. Over to you.
Thank you, Hannes, and thank you, Paul, for the very nice presentation. Now, let me see if I can, yes, here. Share. You see it, the title is The Platform Economy in Europe Between Regulation and Digital Geopolitics. Everybody sees it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I will have an introduction, then define the key concepts, show you a few statistics, discuss whether or not data dependency matter, and conclude about leaving it open for discussion without saying which regulatory approach, but leaving it open. In this introductory slide, I want to give you my perspective, the one I used also in the book mentioned by Paul. Actually, I have been doing just research until 2005, and in 2005, I did my first policy research and study and under the directorship of Paul Timmers. It was the head of unit, and I had won this study with a consortium. Then when in 2015, 2016, I was working as a project officers in the GRC, the research branch of the Commission. At the time, I worked on the dossier for the review of an online platform that was part of the digital single market. So I developed after that, I wrote a book in Italian only so far. It's titled Scienza in Vendita, Science and Sales, where I developed my view on the relationship that determine policy. So the relationship is in this triangle is that whether there is epistemic uncertainty or not. So do we have a good grasp of the empirical phenomenon at end? Whether the interests involved are concentrated or diffused, and whether there is a value consensus or conflict. Within this context, my view is that, and I follow Hirschman on the importance of rhetoric. In this context, rhetorical framing, I will not go into it, but you can read, the framing comes from Tversky and Kahneman. They made the experiment, but that by simply changing order of words, the results of the experimental task would change. Framing is a process by which you put emphasis on things to convince people. And when there is a policy debate, rhetorical framing is a way of lobbying. And to cut it short, I think that the platform, at least in the first phase, managed to achieve what it is called a negative policy bubble. So an undersupply of policy and regulation, and they were able to act in a vacuum and gain scale and the power that they have now. Obviously now, the debate on regulating them is much more prominent, but I think that now it's also very difficult to regulate. So this is just to give you my approach and the way I have looked at this. Okay, so but now let's go to the key concept. Platforms are two-sided or multi-sided markets. So whereas a traditional firm sells raw material to customers, the two-sided firms recruit one type of customers and make it those customers available to another type. So the customers are the raw material. Okay, the demand of one group depends on the demand by the other group in this special kind of firms. So, example, so Uber. Side A is the drivers, side A is the driver, side B the passenger. But then we have multi-sided, like Google search. Search. There are the searchers, the advertisers, and the websites. or I didn't put it here, booking.com is the same. The business partner, the hotel that are searching for a reservation. And a dating club is a typical original two-sided market, you know. There are men and women. The function of the platform is the matching. Now, obviously, there are different types of platforms. There are social media, marketplaces, search engines, online media, app stores. And depending on the type, you have different agents. But usually you always have the platform, business user, and end users. And if you want to analyze them, you know, I will not be able to do that, but you know, you can analyze it along these 7 dimensions: income, expenditure, capital, labor, taxes, and taxes is a big issue with online platform. Market structure, another big issue. Legal, regulation, another one. What is the peculiarity of the platform is that growth begets growth, in simple terms. There is in economics, there is a concept of externality. A negative externality is bad. You know, if a neighbor plays loud music at night, there was a typo there. Positive is the neighbor has beautiful flower garden. So in the platform, the network effect is an externality effect. The more customer on one side, the more customer on the other side, because if there is one more customer on side A, this enable more value for the customer on side B, and so the network effect starts. And it starts also because there is a particular, no, there is a slide missing. I don't know. Anyway, the network effect makes platform apply special pricing. You know, usually in microeconomic theory, we posit that the price is equal or greater than marginal cost. In the platform, sometimes the price is 0, it's free, because to have the network started, okay, you get some for free, one side for free in order to attract the other side, okay? So for instance, in the Uber, the platform doesn't charge anything to the passenger. Then the passenger pays the driver, but the platform charge its price only on the driver. What are the policy concerns from a strict economic point of view? As I say, indirect network effects tend to grow, so tends towards concentration, and these firms can become very big. And they increase their role in traditional industry. For instance, there is a big talk about the fact of how much the hotel and traveling industry depends on this platform. If the network effect is persistent and strong, there is a clear risk of lock-in. So that end user or business user become locked with one platform. Obviously, however, there are also some remarks to make. Not necessarily all two-sided or multi-sided platforms are winner take all, because consumer taste varies, so it may change. There is this economy of scale, congestion. Imagine when you go maybe on Airbnb, it's all taken, it's all full exactly in that moment, so maybe you change the platform. And in jargon, in economic jargon, multi-homing is important. Multi-homing is when you are allowed to go with more platforms. Not only allowed, but you go with more platforms. You don't use only one. But for instance, in the early days of Uber and Lyft, you see the drivers were basically disallowed to use both platforms. So multi-homing was forbidden. But multi-homing is the mechanism that may moderate the tendency to concentration and oligopoly of platforms. Obviously, there are other policy concerns, data and privacy concern, what Zuboff called extraction of behavioral surplus, from our data. There is an issue of monopoly on data and European data dependency, on which I'll come back later. And then there is the issue of behavioral bias, because I do also behavioral economics, and I've done a number of experiments for the Commission. Some claim that the fact that we are not always rational and that we have emotional and cognitive bias is a full market failure, leading to an hyper nudge, in the sense that we don't read the term and condition. The big platform change little thing, doing experiment. We make choice. The machine learning learns and improve next time the offering until, according to a scholar, users lose their autonomy and they are guided by this sort of hyper nudging mechanism. Finally, especially law scholars point out that these firms are actually an hybrid, because are an hybrid between a firm and a market. They are a quasi institution, and this has implication from the point of view of regulation. Let's see some. It was here at the end. I don't know. I put it in the wrong place. The profit maximizer. Anyway, let's keep it. A few statistics. Okay, you see here. This is all data for Europe. You can see here that Facebook in social media has 77.5% of traffic as of December 2020, and Google 93.6% of search engines, a very marginal shares of traffic. Business dependence. You see that not many business firms are doing multi-homing, meaning that several just use and are stuck with one platform. It depends on on the sector, but for instance, in the apps and software, they all are with one, either with Apple or with Android. And even in the other sector, I mean, it's not it's around 50%, which is not so high. So it means that there are a lot of users, business users, that are locked in with only one platform. And see here, between 2013 and 2020, the amount of acquisition made by this company. Okay, you see Google on top, by far the largest number of acquisition, followed by Facebook, Yahoo, Amazon, Twitter, etc., etc. But this is a different way of looking at the same data. It is a bit outdated, but the things have not changed. So in this article by Faravelon and others, so that you find the source in the slide, you can clearly see that there is a power law at work. So few players monopolize traffic and the data that they achieve. And these players are mostly US or China, whereas Europe has a very limited capturing of traffic and the related data. This is a main issue. And so the question is, because we have been reading a lot about digital autonomy, digital sovereignty. Actually, Paul Timmers wrote 2 or 3 interesting pieces on this topic. But from an economic point of view, taking an economist perspective, does data dependency matter? Well, you see, I think that the statistic that I show indicated there are power law. So most influential platforms are in the US and China. So imagine a US platform that dominates, they collect the data from the user at any interaction, they bring the data home, develop algorithms that process them to valuable service and product. And this is a stable self-reinforcing loop, whereas other countries are simply supplier of raw data. The data flow show a clear imbalance. The question is, does this matter for national economic development? Some economists think that it does. And imagine a country that is at the periphery of in terms of data. It provides raw data to this Chinese or US platform and simply buy finished service and product. What option for a policymaker struggling with longer term economic prosperity are there? Well, first we look at economic development theory, and then we answer the question. Okay, in the 1945, 1982, development theory held that the most important things to grow was import substitution strategy, meaning that the country that were developing could not go on simply selling raw materials, commodities, but they should should try to do an import substitution strategy and build their own industrial base through tariffs, restriction on import, and subsidies. Then this was abandoned with what's so-called the Washington Consensus that focus on ICT and the reduction transportation, globalization, outsourcing, break down the value chain. Then we had the disillusion and the disaster of the 2007, 2008, and the long recession. And now we have big data, the data economy. The question is, can we say that if data is the oil of the 21st century, should we say that Europe should follow an import substitution strategy, meaning struggling and trying to retain the data and then, transforming into services instead of being simply an exporter of raw material and an importer of digital services? That's the main issue, because the option for a European country or for Europe as a whole are four actually. The first one is join the predominant value chain led by American platform and try to grow leverage size and grow within it, or join the alternative one, the Chinese value chain, or combine one and two. The fourth is to try to insulate and disconnect and build, its own data autonomy and capacity to produce added value services with the data generated in Europe. Basically, the first three strategic choice options are really variants of one big choice. It means, does joining existing global data value chain point towards an economic and technologically advantageous future? Well, several economists suggest that it's not. They are skeptical about, and that possibly a new import substitution strategy would be the only possible solution for a European country or for the EU as a whole. Obviously, this is the theory. The question is, for a long time, there have been studies by the Commission why there is not a European Google. So how feasible is this? We have to discuss. And also because some of the measures that have been introduced, like a requirement that data remain in the country and data sovereignty clauses, it's not 100% sure that they will work. So I come to almost to the conclusion. In this context, there are two opposing views. Okay, the first one is, let's call it the libertarian or Silicon Valley or typical free market think tank in the US, but also somehow in Europe. Regulating the platform economy would stifle innovation. So deregulation or self-regulation by platform is the best solution. And many commentators on the other side of the Atlantic says that the current attempt to regulate platform is a form of protectionism in disguise. This is there has been some tension between Europe and US on these issues. Finally, this view says that there is an impossibility statement. Technological development are so fast and too complex for regulators to follow and to regulate in an appropriate way. On the other side, there are those who advocate that platform are imposed. On platform is imposed a common carriage public utility regime. Okay, so, and where you break the activity as a platform, I mean, as a matching and the activity of sales. Competition policy needed to break down monopolies, and especially it's important to change the definition of market power, because by the current definition of market power, many of these platforms don't qualify for competition breach. And so some suggest that there should be attention at the data implication, not only at the market power, and especially at the data implication of merger and acquisition. Now, this is also somehow a debate between applying the precautionary principle versus a cost-benefit approach to each single case. I mean, the precautionary principle is the one that has been applied with COVID-19, okay? So because we are under uncertainty, not risk, we adopt a precaution to preempt damages to individual and society. Of competition policy to be applied to curb the power of dominant platforms. However, Cass Sunstein was an advisor of President Obama in a book called The Precautionary Principle, The Law of Fear. If a regulation is defended on the principle of the worst scenario, then a lack of regulation can be defended by the same argument when the consequences of strict regulation are potentially very negative. Moreover, the precautionary principle applied to digital transformation and online platform brings with it a sort of negative narrative that may, in the end, block innovation, also through independent innovation, not only the incumbent. So in conclusion, and there is a point in the critique of Sunstein to precautionary principle. There are many innovative platforms, and not all of them will become as GAFAM. So basically, just to cut it short, I mean, regulators should balance between precaution and case-by-case cost-benefit analysis, because it's a very tough trade-off between protecting rights, avoiding abuse of market power, but on the other hand, not stifling innovation. So these are the two poles of the debate, and I can conclude here, and I'm open to your question. And how do I stop the condivision? Yeah.
Thank you, Cristiano.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and we will go to question and answer. And for the participants here, you can raise your hand, or well, I try to see also your image if you switch on your camera, and then you can also wave, and hopefully I catch your waving. So feel free to start raising your hand, or also you can put something in the chat. One thing, Cristiano, sometimes, at least at my side, your voice was breaking up. I don't know if other people also had that.
But I had a message saying the connection. Now, for instance, they're telling me that my connection is unstable. So yeah, probably. Yeah.
So perhaps sometimes if you answer or we discuss, then it needs to be repeated. But I will tell that then to you, Cristiano. This is fascinating. I guess that people will have also many questions about the precautionary principle. There are also some concepts that now seem to be applied that are coming from the old times, like telecommunications, like unbundling. So the Digital Markets Act kind of says, you know, you may be a platform, you may be a gatekeeper, but then if you're not allowed to start doing ever more acquisitions and bundle that tightly into your offer. And so actually, I think one of the things that the Digital Markets Act, which is still, of course, under discussion, says you have to effectively unbundle, for example, electronic identification. How does that fit in your kind of thinking? This and is there any lessons that we can learn from past efforts to do that type of unbundling?
Well, actually, the unbundling is especially what was proposed during one of the candidates, I don't remember the name, one of the candidates for the Democrats or for the presidency, was the unbundling of the different roles of the platform. Okay, the platform could play as a matching and get something for that, but they could not sell additional services, and especially the cut that they take on some player is too high, and so the unbundling will allow business users to recover more. So the unbundling, it's a viable solution for the platform. The question is how to do it, because I mean, the resistance is, some people think that now Facebook and Google are too big to do something like that, but in the US they broke down Standard Oil, AT&T, and then in Europe we unbundled the telecom. So in theory is a viable solution, but we need a lot of political power and will to do it.
Yeah, thanks. Let me go to people that have raised hands and on the chat. Let me first take on the chat as a question by Alison Stanger. Perhaps Alison wants to jump in and state that question. Alison? Alison, I think you need to switch on your microphone.
Whoops, sorry about that. Thank you so much. This is a fascinating talk on an extremely important topic. I have a couple of questions. The first is about data quality. If data is the oil of the 21st century, does that mean we have to say something about its quality to know whether it's valuable or not? And second, does it matter to whom, to what country or platform the data is being sold? I put that in quotation marks because these platforms provide the services for free. And then I'm just thinking back through my economics textbooks and trying to think of what a good example would be of a indisputably successful import substitution strategy. So the 3 questions, I hope that's not too much, but I really appreciate your answer.
Cristiano, over to you, shoot.
Well, the last question is the easiest one. I mean, the import substitution the most successful cases of import substitution strategy were those of the Dragon of the East, in South Korea and country like that. Whereas Latin America continue to just be a provider of raw material and did not develop. So that the import substitution strategy was the way out of underdevelopment. There is no doubt, and the different trajectory of the Far East and South America show it. The data quality. Obviously, the data quality matters for to avoiding discrimination and bias, because obviously we listen to this anthropomorphization of the algorithm. Reality, the algorithm learn from data. If the data already reflects some societal bias, it's obviously, it happened, for instance, the Amazon algorithm for recruiting people were recruiting only men and not women, and then it was disbanded. But on the other hand, the argument that Shoshana Zuboff makes is that from the perspective of this company, I'm sure that the data they have are of quality, because they know everything about our behavior and our preference, and they continue to use to improve the way to keep you logged and to, obviously they say, and this is another argument, that they are trying to improve services for their users. And it's true that the services are for free. Whether it matters that whether it matters the location of the data, no? And obviously on the US side, the position was to say it doesn't matter, Europe is going into protectionism. On the European side, I mean, in a way, Europe is lagging behind also in terms of the development, not so much the research, but the development and implementation of artificial intelligence. And obviously, why? I mean, the Chinese and the US platform have troves of data to train algorithms and improve them, and European platform have less of that. And so, to a certain extent, the data nationality may matter, I think. But I do not have a definitive answer.
Thanks. There are two hands raised. Let me start with Moshe. Moshe, you had a question. By the way, my apologies for raising a debate on binary representations of 16. Let's leave that part of the discussion. It was just a test whether you're all awake. Some people are. Moshe, over to you.
A comment and a question. So the comment is this mantra or regulation will stifle innovation. It's kind of an empty threat. Okay, I mean, innovation should never be considered an end. Innovation is means for societal progress. So on the other hand, saying a regulation will stop a societal progress, that's a much easier proposition. So, I mean, we should stop waving this empty threat, in my opinion. The question is, does Europe have the political power to force, let's say, suppose we decide that we want Facebook to split off Instagram and WhatsApp, because they're already, we should never let them, in fact, buy them in the first place. Does Europe by itself has enough the political clout to tell Facebook, if you want to do business in the EU, you must split off Instagram and WhatsApp, and we're going to scrutinize every acquisition?
Okay, first answer to your question. For me, it's difficult to maybe Paul would know better because he knows European Commission. But I think that if there is an alignment between the new US administration that was also talking about this problem and Europe, I think it would be possible. Europe by itself, I think, but this is my very personal opinion, like anyone else could give. Europe alone, I don't know. On the other hand, we saw that at the time of Mario Monti in the 90s, he was able to win a battle against Microsoft. So the competition commissioner in Europe quite some power, so they may try. Concerning your comments, I reported two different views. I do not particularly hold the view that regulation stifles innovation. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. So anyway, that slide was not my views, but reporting the debate in a very stylized and simplified fashion.
Cristiano, perhaps before I go to Helga, just a quick question in between. If you talk about the power, I mean, as governments and looking at regulation, that's only one part of the equation. You also have, for example, capital markets that surely play an important role for platforms too. And, later stage capital is 5 times larger in the US than it is in Europe. So how do capital markets interplay with this?
Well, just one second, because just 1 second, it starts raining. I have to take away the pillow from
Everybody has a beautiful background. Where can it rain? Everybody has the sun is shining. Everybody is sitting on the beach. Where is the rain here?
In
Milan. We are Northern European in Milan,
Yeah, you have drifted off.
Okay. Well, the capital market. I don't think it would be negative for the capital market, breaking down, etc. There would be many new opportunities for smaller company to go for a new round of financing, new IPOs, etc. I don't think the capital. Actually, if you read The Economist or the Financial Times, they're not against this type of solution. They see a potentiality there.
Interesting. Yeah. Helga, over to you. Helga Novotny.
Yes, thank you. I have two questions. As you are undoubtedly aware, the discussion within the European Union about technological sovereignty has picked up recently. And you cannot completely separate speaking about technological sovereignty and say, well, data do not enter. So what is your assessment of where we stand now? What is the potential? Where do you think we will go forward? The second question is of a different kind. Listening to you and others, if we go beyond a merely economic point of view, I think it becomes clear that we are a bit naive if we think data are neutral in the sense, they are raw material, which is a sort of neutral description, while data are extracted from particular cultural contexts, and they are employed in particular, transformed, but employed in particular cultural contexts. So where does this consideration enter beyond the mere economics that has been described quite well? Thank you.
Well, the first question, so when you say technological sovereignty, you mean not only the platform, but the new infrastructure that is coming out, right? The 5G, Internet of Things, and all the new digital infrastructure. And well, on that respect, well, for instance, you see, there was a launch by the German government of a new project that I cannot remember the name of, a new European clouds as a edge clouds, as a new form of infrastructure so that the data will stay there. There is a lot going on in Europe about this, and actually, I am now writing a brief for the European Parliament about the digital decade and that autonomy of Europe. So the topic remains very high in the policy agenda in Europe, and it does not. And you're right, that does not concern only the platform, but the overall digital transformation and infrastructure. Because in the end, all this scenario that we see will need faster and faster communication, lots of spaces to put the data. So the data are there, but we need the infrastructure. And even in that case, there is a lot of problem. I mean, this Paul knows better than me because he wrote about it. It's because these intersect with cybersecurity, okay? Artificial intelligence, new technology, and cybersecurity, it becomes, surveillance system is becoming, they are all entwined, and they're becoming, when in 2005, we were working on e-government with Paul, it was an interesting topic, but not high politics. Now, this issue has become of a high politics level, this technological issue. On the other comment about, obviously, data are cultural, but as far as I can see, Google is able to use the data and attract the users of all different countries. So they probably, I don't know, they hire some behavioralist or cultural expert in the various countries, and then they adapt the services to each country, and they continue to grow. So I don't think that this cultural specificity blocks, especially the big players, to pursue their own interest. Moreover, online, we are subjected to some cognitive bias that tend to be universal and cross-cultural. That's my view.
Can you explain that a little bit, Cristiano?
I think we import. I just wanted to add one sentence. I think we import what Google, sets certain standards of the way how we think. I mean, there is a kind of framing behind it, and we adopt it, and so we become dependent on something. And there is, of course, always the risk that we lose cultural specificity.
No, obviously, this of course, but Paul, what do you want?
Yeah, I mean, you are saying that we are having a cognitive bias. The last point that you made is perhaps immediately related to what Helga was just saying. We become more uniform.
Well, but it's not that we become more uniform. I mean, from the perspective of behavioral and neuroscience, there are certain mechanisms of our brain that are hardwired because of our evolution. For instance, and there are experiments that prove this. Why people then are so keen on staying on Facebook and fill in the sometimes even the questionnaire, etc., etc. This is based on the reciprocity heuristics. If you receive a gift, you have to give something in exchange. It exists in all culture. This is why closing down Facebook and Google would create a lot of protests all over the world, regardless of the cultural differences. That's the strength, the incredible strength of these corporations.
Yeah. Helga, okay. Can I go to Wertner? To Hannes, sorry.
Yes, thank you. You can go. I would like to go along this line of discussion because I think it's not only about geopolitical sovereignty. I think it's about policy making in general. It's where is policy making defined and what are the means and to what end is it done? And I think we should also see probably some positive side on that, because look at those online platforms, how many people are reached and how many persons could participate and how this could be transformed in a positive sense. And I would like to reference here Alison Stanger. Maybe the issue is in these platforms to transform from consumer to citizen, where we have a different type of participation and different types of rules. So I think it's not only to abandon, but to redefine the rules, the structures, and the way of participation. And to understand that this is really a policy-making issue here. It's not just an economic issue. This is more a comment than a question, I think.
Yeah, but that comment is in line with those scholars who advocate that this become public utility. Okay, yes. So the common carriage and public utility regime, because in theory, yes. I mean, Google used with this mobility data, et cetera, and with a lot of other data, tried to help governments with the pandemic. The question is, I mean, in this way, they embellish their image, et cetera, but they also are contributing to surveillance as a private player. I know that for sure this platform reach a lot of people and have also public positive externality. The question is that they are private. Yes. And so one way would be a serious co-regulation, an attempt to co-regulation, not self-regulation, because these are just the typical lip service of corporation, but a co-regulation between policymaker and platform. But obviously, if they, if Google was launched by one government, that would be a great common public infrastructure.
Can we for a minute jump to from that to a bit more general point, Cristiano, because Cristiano, you have a lot of experience with policy making and also preparing for policy making and impact assessments. And so perhaps we can benefit from your presence here to give you your insight or your view on did policy making improve with better impact assessments? How can policymakers, are policymakers learning to use more integrated policy making? Or what is your view on where policy making itself is going?
Well, it's a pity you don't read Italian, because I in my book, I discussed this. I've been working at the frontiers between science and policy making since 2005. And, because that time I started to work with you, and from then on, and I keep trying to bridge between the ivory tower and policy. I must say that there is a famous theory of the two communities that have different jargon and different. Sometimes it's that real science goes by curiosity and by certain time. And many times the policymaker wants things yesterday. And this prevent them from fully benefiting from the advice that we give. I mean, I do a lot of studies for the Commission, and sometimes it happens and that the things go in that direction. Sometimes it's I have to resist, the attempt to have the design cut for what they want to show at the end.
Yeah, not very optimistic.
But it's an ongoing process.
There's an interesting exchange going on the chat about quality of data. Peter Mischer, John Chofby, Hans Akkermans. Perhaps John or Hans or Peter wants to just jump in and make the point here about data quality, because that's I guess a quite relevant one in this discussion. Perhaps Hans was, I think, Hans was one of the last ones contributing to that. Anyone wants to jump in?
Yeah. Yeah, I do think the notion of quality is a relative notion, and it depends on your purpose. And I think a key thing is that for these big tech companies, what is quality for them is different from quality for the general public. And I think that's where policy issues really come in. Google, for example, in a sense, does not care whether their algorithms are correct or unbiased. The key thing is that they deliver value for the company.
Yes.
And that is simply different from what, let's say, the average engine search user considers to be quality.
Cristiano?
No, I agree. Then let me make the disclaimer that I approached the topic from an economist point of view and took the platform as black box, so didn't reflect a lot about the data quality. But I really think that what Hans says is correct. As long as their algorithm predicts something that occurs, okay, even though maybe the best is the data, but when you use a lot of data, integrate a lot of data, and then in the end you get it, So obviously, now whether when you do a search, the hits that are returned to you are the good one, that's a different thing, because obviously there is a confirmation bias. You see, the more you search some things, and then the algorithm is biased by your search, and they report you always the same thing. Obviously, as a researcher, then I learned to search first on the databases of a journal, etc. When I do a Google search, I know how to read through, and I see that many things they are irrelevant or they're just repeating things. But in the end, it makes the job for Google. So the data quality is, from their perspective, is a different thing. I agree with Hans.
And there may have to be other incentives or obligations in order to ensure data quality. Is that what you're suggesting? Because their incentive.
Well, I think that the Commission did something about transparency of algorithm and why the first 10 hits are this and not that, and usually they are. I think there was, I cannot remember, but there was an initiative on that. Okay, I think the Vestager has tried to impose that. I don't know if in the end it came.
Yeah. I see we are nearing the end of the hour, and there are several comments on the chat, but I take the privilege of moderating to ask a question that I find is a very intriguing topic. Recently, Cristiano, I was reading up on the regulation on digital operational resilience in the financial sector. And one of the things that was striking me is that the financial sector, probably as the first one, but others are also doing this increasingly, are worried about systemic risks. obviously from a digital operational resilience point of view, but these systemic risks also come about because of concentration. So they are explicitly warning actually against concentration. You have to reveal if you are doing business with a market actor that has where there's a high degree of concentration. Is this idea of systemic risk? We have now seen a systemic dependency, for example, in the oil pipeline in the United States. You have financial markets, you have systemic risks in the health system, in energy systems, electricity systems. Is there systemic risk another kind of reason to pay special attention to platforms, or are they just another player?
No. That's the systemic risk. It would be another, in this case, rhetorical weapon in the end of the regulator to break down. But because if you imagine that as they try, a lot of the apps and for COVID were put onto Google or Apple, and if their system go down, then you have a system breakdown. So in this sense, it should be like the TCP/IP protocol of the internet, that if it finds a wall in one side, it goes on the other. Obviously, systemic dependency creates systemic risk. That could be an argument for having a more pluralistic market of platforms.
Yeah. Are there other questions at this moment? Someone I would like to can give a final question. Not Cristiano. Personally, I find this a really intriguing topic, and it's also fascinating to see that now, for example, with the Digital Markets Act, the European Commission has stepped into an area where there's a real shift in policy. I heard a competition lawyer complaining that the Digital Market Act is now defining her job. And they don't like that. You know, they go from what is called ex-post competition intervention into ex-ante regulation of behavior, and that's a job definition for competition lawyers. And that's a real change in mindset. So you may almost wonder, how is the pendulum swinging between ex-ante and ex-post regulation in the digital world? And an excellent presentation too, Cristiano. Many thanks for that. I hope that everybody here also enjoyed it. And with that, Cristiano, once again, many thanks, and all the participants too. And I hand back to Hannes.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you from my side. Thank you, Cristiano, for your excellent presentation, showing also that technology is really influencing policy, and we really have to look at policy making, and not only at economic terms, but in general issues. And thanks, Paul, to you. I thank you all for participating. Our next presentations, one will be on next Thursday, which is the 27th of May. It's not within our lecture series, but it's the Gödel lecture of our Faculty of Computer Science Informatics here at TU Wien at the same time at 5:00 p.m. our time. It will be by Moshe Wadi, where he will speak about technology is changing the future or steering, but who is steering? So he will draw, let's say, a line from the Vienna Circle up to the Vienna Manifesto on Digital Humanism. We will have a discussion on the EU regulation on AI, which will be on June the 8th, again at 5 p.m. And there will be a panel discussion with representatives from the Commission and from the US to have those different points of view. And this discussion will be moderated by Erich Brehm. And on 15th of May, we have Alison Stanger with us. She will talk about digital humanism, democracy in the global context, as well as big data. And she will elaborate on things she asked today. So it will be also related to the platform and who is making policy and how are democratic rules defined. So these are our next talks. I hope I will see you all there. And for those who want to have a look at the presentation, you can go to the website. Cristiano will share his presentation with us, so you can download it from the website. And you can go to our YouTube Digital Humanism channel. You can look it up. And there you see not only the presentation of today, but all the previous presentations and panels and workshop we had up to now. Goodbye and have a nice evening or a nice day wherever you are. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Bye, bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.